This video shows posters with information about Australia's ongoing journey with reconciliation. Each poster has a heading and introduction paragraph with white text on a black background. Each page has a border with the wrap artwork. Most frames have a mix of text and photos or graphics and a QR code in orange in the bottom corner. Cover image. Text reads, National Reconciliation Week 2025 theme, Bridging Now to Next, the 27th of May to the 3rd of June #NRW 2025 reconciliation.org.au, on a black poster with artwork representing native flora in red, green, orange and yellow. Frame 1. Text reads, National Reconciliation Week 2025. Life Without Barriers acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional owners and custodians of this country and their deep and ongoing connection to land, waters, and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present and acknowledge the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices. We believe that reconciliation must live in the hearts, minds, and actions of all Australians. We are committed to an ongoing journey of truth-telling and reconciliation. We also recognise and value the contributions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander employees, carers, people we support, and communities in this collective journey. For National Reconciliation Week 2025, Bridging Now to Next, we invite you to explore a selection of key events that have shaped Australia since colonisation 237 years ago. We acknowledge that this is only a small glimpse into our shared history, and that many other significant moments and individuals, both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and non-Indigenous Australians, have played vital roles in advancing reconciliation. This exhibition offers a snapshot of both the challenges and progress in our collective journey. Each poster includes a QR code, allowing you to delve deeper into the stories and events that have shaped our nation. Please be advised that this content may include images or names of people who have passed away. This content may also discuss sensitive topics such as trauma, cultural loss, or historical events related to colonization, which could be distressing to some. The following is an act of truth-telling, an essential step on our shared journey toward reconciliation. Frame 2. Text reads, The Journey So Far 1788 to 1838. This period was marked by dispossession, resistance, and survival. Aboriginal people fought to defend their lands, cultures, and families against the violent impacts of colonization. Timeline highlights: 1788 First Fleet arrives. British invasion begins. Governor Arthur Phillip declares the land terra nullius, denying Aboriginal sovereignty. 1789 Smallpox epidemic devastates Aboriginal communities, killing up to 70% around Sydney. 1790 to 1802 Pemulwuy's resistance. Bidjigal warrior leads a decade-long campaign against British settlers. 1816 Macquarie's punitive expeditions. Military-led attacks on Aboriginal communities result in massacres. 1824 Martial law in Bathurst. Violent conflicts between Wiradjuri resistance fighters and settlers. Windradine emerges as a key leader. 1838 Mile Creek Massacre. At least 28 Aboriginal people are murdered. Some settlers are later convicted, an unprecedented legal outcome. There is one image in the corner. The painting is of the First Fleet arrives at Sydney Cove. Frame 3. Text reads, Extract from Condition of the Aborigines by Bishop John Bede Paulding in 1845. In this document, Bishop Paulding discusses the treatment of Aboriginal Australians by European settlers and expresses concern over the prevailing attitudes towards Indigenous people. The specific passage mentioned reflects his observations of settlers' justifications for violence against Aboriginal people. I have myself heard a man, educated, and a large proprietor of sheep and cattle, maintain that there was no more harm in shooting a native than in shooting a wild dog. I have heard it maintained by others that it is the course of providence, that blacks should disappear before the white, and the sooner the process was carried out the better, for all parties. I fear such opinions prevail to a great extent. Very recently, in the presence of two clergymen, a man of education narrated, as a good thing, that he had been one of a party who had pursued the blacks, in consequence of cattle being rushed by them, and that he was sure that they shot upwards of 100. When expostulated with, he maintained that there was nothing wrong in it, that it was preposterous to suppose they had souls. In this opinion he was joined by another educated person present. There are two black and white photos. One is Bishop John Paulding. The second is a photo of a document named, Extract from, Condition of the Aborigines. Frame 4. Text reads, Aboriginal Protection ACTs 1869 to 1969. There were multiple Aboriginal Protection ACTs enacted across the Australian states and territories from 1869 to 1969. These laws were designed to control nearly all aspects of Aboriginal people's lives, including where they could live and work, where and if they could attend school, and whom they could marry. Victoria introduced the first Aboriginal Protection Act in 1869. This act granted the government extensive control over the lives of Aboriginal people, including the power to remove children from their families. The act was repealed in 1967, 98 years after its introduction. Similar Aboriginal Protection ACTs were enacted across various states and territories, allowing authorities to make decisions on behalf of Aboriginal peoples, often without their consent. These laws systematically oppressed Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, stripping them of their lands, rights, children, and freedoms. Although many have been repealed, their legacy still affects Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities today, primarily through intergenerational trauma from the stolen generations. There are two photos. The front page of the Aborigines Protection Act, 1886, and the General Certificate of Exemption for Joseph Edwards, with a photo of Joseph. Frame 5. Text reads, The Journey So Far 1901 The Constitution came into force. Aboriginal people continue to be forced onto reserves and missions under racial segregation, known as protection legislation. 1912 David Unipon calls for Narrandjeri autonomy over Point Macleay Reserve. 1924 The AAAPA is generally recognised as Australia's first pan-Aboriginal activist organisation. 1926 Unipon calls for the establishment of an Aboriginal state. 1927 Fred Maynard calls for the abolition of protection and control of Aboriginal affairs. 1933 Yorta Yorta Man, William Cooper, petitions the King seeking intervention including representation in federal parliament. The Commonwealth does not send it on to the King. William established the Australian Aborigines League. Aboriginal man Joe Anderson, also known as King Burriga, calls for Indigenous representation in the federal parliament. 1934 David Unipon urges the Commonwealth to take over Aboriginal affairs from the states. 1936 Torres Strait Islander workers in the pearling industry go on strike and win, leading the Queensland government to establish Islander councils that give Torres Strait Islanders some political representation and power. 1937 Yorta Yorta Man William Cooper petitions King George VI for representation in Parliament. There are two black and white photos. One photo is David Unipon and the second is William Cooper, Australian Aborigines League banner. They are both wearing suits. Frame 6. Text reads, The first day of mourning, the 26th of January 1938. The first day of mourning was a culmination of years of work by the Australian Aborigines League, AAL, and the Aborigines Progressive Association, APA. It would become the inspiration for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander activism throughout the remainder of the 20th century. In the early 1960s, both organisations would reform and reshape and become the driving force calling for a constitutional referendum that would take place in 1967. The AAL was able to persuade many religious denominations to declare the Sunday before Australia Day as Aboriginal Sunday. This was to serve as a reminder of the unjust treatment of Indigenous people. The first of these occurred in 1940 and continued until 1955, when it moved to the first Sunday in July. In 1957, with support and cooperation from federal and state governments, the churches and significant Indigenous organisations, a National Aborigines Day Observance Committee, NADOC, was formed, which continues to this day as NAIDOC. There is one large black and white photo of a group of people at the first day of mourning protest, with key activists including William Ferguson and Jack Patton. They are holding a sign which reads, Aborigines Conference Day of Mourning. Frame 7. Text reads, Yirrkala Bark Petitions 1963. In August 1963, 2 bark petitions were presented to the Australian Parliament's House of Representatives. This was a formal attempt by the Yolngu to have their land rights recognised. It was also the first time that documents incorporating First Nations ways of representing relationships to land were recognised by Parliament. In July 1963, 2 Labor members of Parliament, Mr. Beasley and Mr. Bryant, travelled to Arnhem Land. They were assisted by the superintendent of the Yirrkala mission. The Yolngu told the parliamentarians they had not been informed about the federal government's plans and showed them mining preparations already underway near Yirrkala and in important fishing areas. Beasley suggested that the Yolngu petition the federal parliament in a form that expressed their culture. On 14 August 1963, 2 petitions, one on bark and one on paper, were tabled in the House of Representatives at Parliament House in Canberra. When the federal minister responsible for the Northern Territory tried to dismiss the petitioners as unrepresentative of the Yirrkala clans, the Yolngu sent another paper petition, signed and thumb-printed by 31 people. On 28 August 1963, opposition leader Arthur Calwell tabled the second bark petition. The other 2 bark petitions were sent to Gordon Bryant and Stan Davey, a well-known campaigner for Indigenous rights. The petitions directly led to establishing the Select Committee on Grievances of Yirrkala Aborigines, Arnhem Land Reserve. They were the first petitions in Australian history to instigate an immediate parliamentary response. The committee travelled to Darwin and Yirrkala to hear evidence from the Yolngu and Northern Territory officials. In October 1963, the committee published a report with its findings. It did not recommend a halt to mining. Instead, it recommended that sacred sites be protected, compensation for loss of livelihood be paid, and a dedicated committee monitor the mining project. There are 4 photos side by side of the Yirrkala bark petition and artworks. Frame 8. Text reads, The Freedom Ride 1965. In 1965, a group of students from the University of Sydney drew national and international attention to the appalling living conditions of Aboriginal people and the racism that was rife in New South Wales country towns. Known as the Freedom Ride, this 15-day bus journey through regional New South Wales would become a defining moment in Australian activism. The 1965 Freedom Ride through New South Wales towns and the publicity it gained, including in overseas newspapers such as the New York Times, illuminated to the world the racial discrimination happening in Australia. While the life of the SAFA was relatively short, the ride had a lasting impact and served to strengthen the campaigns that followed to bring about greater equality and recognition for Aboriginal people. There are 2 photos. The first is a photo of a large group of the Freedom Ride students in front of a bus. There is a sign behind them white reads, Student Action for Aborigines. The second photo is students protesting in the street holding a banner saying, Student Action for Aborigines. Frame 9. Text reads, Wave Hill Walk-Off 1966. Gurindji man Vincent Lingiari led the walk-off on 23 August 1966. Joining him were 200 Aboriginal stockmen, servants, and their families. The walk-off was born of several motivating factors, including calls for improved working conditions. However, the primary catalyst was the Gurindji people reclaiming their lands. The conditions at Wave Hill Station had been substandard well before the walk-off in 1966. In 1937, a government report found that the pastoralists in charge of the station had been quite ruthless in denying their Aboriginal labour proper access to basic human rights. In 1945, white men employed at Wave Hill received £2 - 8 a week while the Indigenous workers were paid less than the minimum wage of 5 shillings per day. The Gurindji workers were relegated to humpies corrugated iron structures without floors, lighting, basic sanitation, facilities for cooking, or even furniture. There was also no safe source of drinking water. By 1966, the Gurindji at Wave Hill had had enough of the poor treatment on their country. Lingiari and the Aboriginal workers left Wave Hill, moving from the station to Dagurau, Wattie Creek, closer to their sacred sites. The strikers submitted a petition to the Governor-General, Lord Richard Casey, for a lease of 1,300 square kilometres, which the Gurindji would cooperate as a mining and livestock lease. Casey refused. The strikers stayed in camps away from the station despite the NT government's attempts to cut off food. Lingiari and the other leaders of the walk-off travelled around Australia to speak about the strike, helping to gather wider support. In 1975, the Whitlam government entered into negotiations with the company that ran the station. After reaching an agreement, on 16 August of that year, Prime Minister Gough Whitlam granted the Gurindji the lease to a piece of the land. He did so in a handover ceremony, where he famously poured soil into Vincent Lingiari's hands, a tangible demonstration of returning land to traditional owners. For the first time since European settlement, Australia recognised Indigenous peoples' right to their traditional land and country. There is one black and white photo of a group of men. They are sitting and standing under a sign which says, Gurindji Cattle Station. Frame 10. Text says, NAIDOC History Timeline. Before the 1920s, Aboriginal rights groups boycotted Australia Day, the 26th of January, in protest against the status and treatment of Indigenous Australians. By the 1920s, they were increasingly aware that the broader Australian public were largely ignorant of the boycotts. If the movement were to make progress, it would need to be active. Several organisations emerged to fill this role, particularly the Australian Aborigines Progressive Association, AAPA, in 1924 and the Australian Aborigines League, AAL, in 1932. Their efforts were largely overlooked, and due to police harassment, the AAPA abandoned their work in 1927. In 1935, William Cooper, founder of the AAL, drafted a petition to send to King George V, asking for special Aboriginal electorates in federal parliament. The Australian government believed that the petition fell outside its constitutional responsibilities. On Australia Day, 1938, protesters marched through the streets of Sydney, followed by a congress attended by over 1,000 people. One of the first major civil rights gatherings in the world, it was known as the Day of Mourning. Following the Congress, a deputation led by William Cooper presented Prime Minister Joseph Lyons with a proposed national policy for Aboriginal people. This was again rejected because the government did not hold constitutional powers in relation to Aboriginal people. After the Day of Mourning, there was a growing feeling that it should be a regular event. In 1939, William Cooper wrote to the National Missionary Council of Australia to seek their assistance in supporting and promoting an annual event. From 1940 until 1955, the Day of Mourning was held annually on the Sunday before Australia Day and was known as Aborigines Day. In 1955, Aborigines Day was shifted to the first Sunday in July after it was decided the day should become not simply a protest day but also a celebration of Aboriginal culture. 1956 to 1990 major Aboriginal organisations, state and federal governments, and a number of church groups all supported the formation of NADOC, the National Aborigines Day Observance Committee. At the same time, the second Sunday in July became a day of remembrance for Aboriginal people and their heritage. In 1972, the Department of Aboriginal Affairs was formed, as a major outcome of the 1967 referendum. In 1974, the NADOC committee was composed entirely of Aboriginal members for the first time. The following year, it was decided that the event should cover a week, from the first to second Sunday in July. In 1984, NADOC asked that National Aborigines Day be made a national public holiday, to help celebrate and recognise the rich cultural history that makes Australia unique. While this has not happened, other groups have echoed the call. 1991 present, with a growing awareness of the distinct cultural histories of Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders, NADOC was expanded to recognise Torres Strait Islander people. The committee became known as the National Aborigines and Islanders Day Observance Committee, NAIDOC. This new name has become the title for the whole week, not just the day. Each year, a theme is chosen to reflect the important issues and events for NAIDOC. During the mid-1990s, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission, ATSIC, took over the management of NAIDOC until ATSIC was disbanded in 2004-05. There were interim arrangements in 2005. Since then, a national NAIDOC committee, until recently chaired by former Senator Aidan Ridgway, has made key decisions on national celebrations each year. The National Committee has representatives from most states and territories. Frame 11. Text says, the 1967 referendum. On 27 May 1967, 2 questions were put to the Australian people in a referendum. One concerned the balance of numbers in the Senate and the House of Representatives. The other question, the one most people refer to and remember about the historic 1967 referendum, concerned 2 references in the Australian Constitution that discriminated against First Nations peoples. It was asked as such, do you approve the proposed law for the alteration of the Constitution entitled, An Act to Alter the Constitution to omit certain words relating to the people of the Aboriginal race in any state, and so that Aboriginals are to be counted in reckoning the population? It was the most successful referendum outcome since Federation. Voter turnout was strong, with almost 94% of eligible Australians voting in the referendum. The result was an emphatic yes to the above question, with an overall majority of nearly 91%. The Constitution was thus changed by the Constitution alteration. There are 2 photos, one of protesters marching in support of the referendum and one of a poster with a young Aboriginal child and the words, "Right wrongs right yes." Frame 12. Text says, the Aboriginal Tent Embassy 1972. On 26 January 1972, 4 First Nations men set up a beach umbrella on the lawns opposite Parliament House in Canberra. Describing the umbrella as the Aboriginal Embassy, the men were protesting the McMahon government's approach to Indigenous land rights. The embassy operated in several locations and took many forms before its permanent establishment on those same lawns in 1992. The protesters' goals have changed over time and now include not only land rights but also First Nations sovereignty and self-determination. There are 2 photos, one black and white photo which shows Michael Anderson, Billy Craigie, Bert Williams and Tony Coorey at the original setup of the Aboriginal Tent Embassy in 1972, marking the beginning of a significant movement for Indigenous rights in Australia. The second photo is in colour and shows the site of the Aboriginal Tent Embassy on the lawns outside Old Parliament House. Frame 13. Text says, the journey so far continued. 1972 to 1983. 1972 The Larrakia Petition, the National Aboriginal Consultative Committee, NACC, is established, and the Larrakia Petition is sent to the Queen. 1975 The Racial Discrimination Act is enacted by the Federal Parliament. 1976 The Commonwealth used its constitutional power to legislate land rights in the territory. This starts the push to use the power from the 1967 referendum to create national land rights. 1977 The Fraser government creates the first National Aboriginal Conference. 1979 Following nationwide consultations with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, the National Aboriginal Conference calls for a treaty to be negotiated between Aboriginal people and the Commonwealth. 1983 Committee The Senate's Standing Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs hands down its report 200 years later which recommends the government consider a treaty in consultation with Aboriginal peoples. The committee also recommends the insertion into the Constitution of a provision, which would confer a broad power on the Commonwealth to enter into a compact with the representatives of the Aboriginal people. There are 2 photos of old, yellowed, handwritten letters, the Larrakia Petition to the Queen for Land Rights. Frame 14. Text says, Handback of Uluru 1985. Uluru is one of Australia's most important icons. It is also a sacred site for the local First Nations people, the Anangu. The Anangu lobbied for decades for the rights to their traditional lands. When the Hawke government handed back the title deeds for the Uluru Kata Tjuta National Park to the Anangu people in October 1985, it ended decades of determined lobbying by the traditional owners to have their rights recognised. There are 2 images. Image 1. a commemorative poster presented to Governor-General Sir Ninian Stephen during the 1985 handback of Uluru to its traditional owners. The design features a black, red, and yellow colour scheme resembling the Aboriginal flag, with a yellow silhouette of Uluru replacing the central sun. Blue felt tip signatures of the Anangu traditional owners from the Uluru Kata Juta Land Trust are printed at the bottom. Image 2. Traditional owners Peter Buller, Peter Kanari, Nipa Winmati, and his wife Barbara Kyokadu stand with Governor-General Sir Ninian Stephen, Minister Clyde Holding, left, and Barry Cohen, right, during the official ceremony marking the handback of Uluru Kata Juta National Park on 26 October 1985. The group holds the commemorative poster symbolizing the return of the land to its rightful custodians. Frame 15. Text says, The Barunga Statement 1988. The Barunga Statement is one of several significant painted documents that Aboriginal people have presented to the Australian government. Painted during the 1988 Barunga Sport and Cultural Festival, it was the culmination of years of engagement and discussion between Aboriginal groups in the Northern Territory and the Australian government. The statement combines Aboriginal symbolism from Northern and Central Australia and a translation of these into English text, signalling collaboration and communication across cultures and languages. The Barunga Statement calls for recognition of Aboriginal rights, for a national elected Aboriginal and Islander organisation to oversee Aboriginal and Islander affairs, and for the Commonwealth to negotiate a treaty. There is one photo of the Barunga Statement. The artwork features natural pigments incorporating traditional Aboriginal symbols and English text. Frame 16. Text says, The First National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day 1988. On 4 August 1988, the first National Aboriginal and Islander Children's Day was established. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples felt that a day was needed to celebrate our children, to instill confidence in them and to make them feel special and included. The date 4 August was chosen as the day to celebrate as it has historically been used to communally celebrate the birthdays of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children who were taken from their families at a young age, without knowing their birthday, the stolen generations. The first National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day 2024, Strong in Culture, Stronger Together. 2018, SNAICC celebrating our children for 30 years. 2012, Our Children, Our Culture, Our Way. 2006, My Culture is Me, I Am Proud and Strong. 2000, Celebrating Our Children's Future Cultural Inheritance, the Right of Every Indigenous Child in Australia. 1994, Children, Our Dreaming Keep Our Families Together. 1988, Return Our Kids in 1988 Stop the Cultural Genocide. Image. The logo for National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day features a sun at the center. Two black hands extend outward from either side of the sun. The text, Children's Day, is written in black. Frame 17. Text says, The Mabo Case 1982–1992. The Mabo case was a significant legal case in Australia that recognised the land rights of the Meriam people, the traditional owners of the Murray Islands in the Torres Strait. The Mabo case successfully overturned the myth that at the time of colonisation, Australia was terra nullius, or land belonging to no one. The High Court recognised the fact that Indigenous peoples had lived in Australia for thousands of years and enjoyed rights to their land according to their own laws and customs. 12 months later, the Native Title Act 1993 was passed. The 5 Meriam people who mounted the case were Eddie Koiki Mabo, Reverend David Parsi, Sam Parsi, James Rice and one Meriam woman, Seluia Mapo Sale. Eddie Koiki Mabo was the first named plaintiff, and the case became known as the Mabo case. Every year on 3 June we celebrate Mabo Day, which commemorates the life of Eddie Koiko Mabo and marks the anniversary of the historic 1992 Mabo decision. There are 2 black and white images. Image 1 is the History is Made newspaper clipping. The second is Eddie Koiki Mabo in Townsville. Frame 18. Text says, The First National Reconciliation Week 1996. It began as a week of prayer for reconciliation in 1993, supported by Australia's major religious groups. 3 years later, it evolved into National Reconciliation Week under the guidance of the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation, now Reconciliation Australia. At its heart, reconciliation is about strengthening relationships between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and non-Indigenous peoples, for the benefit of all Australians. National Reconciliation Week is an ideal time for organisations, schools, universities, community groups and workplaces to advance understanding of reconciliation within their own places and their own lives. National Reconciliation Week provides a focus for working towards our goal of a just, equitable and reconciled Australia. Each year there is a theme for National Reconciliation Week. Here are some themes and posters from recent years. There are 5 images of various National Reconciliation Week posters from over the years in colour. Frame 19. Text says, Bringing 'em Home Report 1997. The 689-page final report of the National Inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families was tabled in Parliament on 26 May 1997. It traces the past laws, practices and policies that resulted in the forced removal of children and makes recommendations to support healing and reconciliation for the stolen generations, their families and the Australian public more broadly. Bringing 'em Home was the name given to the final report of the National Inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families conducted by the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission, now called the Australian Human Rights Commission. There is one image, a colour photo of the report's front cover. It is an adult and child interacting with an orange and purple sunset behind them with the words, Bringing 'em Home. Text continues, The stolen generations refers to a period in Australia's history when Aboriginal children were removed from their families through government policies. This happened from the mid-1800s to the 1970s. In the 1860s, Victoria became the first state to pass laws authorising Aboriginal children to be removed from their parents. Similar policies were later adopted by other states and territories and by the federal government when it was established in the 1900s. For about a century, thousands of Aboriginal children were systematically taken from their families, communities and culture, many never to be returned. These children are known as the stolen generation survivors or stolen children. These children were taken by the police, from their homes, on their way to or from school. They were placed in over 480 institutions, adopted or fostered by non-Indigenous people, and often subjected to abuse. The children were denied all access to their culture, they were not allowed to speak their language, and they were punished if they did. The impacts of this are still being felt today. There are currently more than 17,000 stolen generation survivors in Australia. Over 1/3 of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are their descendants. In Western Australia, almost half of the population have stolen generation links. Frame 20. Text says, The first annual Sorry Day, the 26th of May 1998. The first National Sorry Day event was held 1 year after the tabling of the Commission's report of the National Inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, the Bringing 'em Home report. The inquiry and report examined the forcible removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families and communities and paid tribute to the strength of First Nations people who shared their stories. The government has still not implemented many of the report's recommendations. Today, First Nations children are removed from their families at rates higher than that of the stolen generations, disrupting their connection to country, community and culture. Sorry Day continues to serve as an ongoing call to implement the recommendations of the Bringing 'em Home report, and an opportunity to acknowledge the systemic failures that contribute to the disproportionate rates of child removals. There are 2 colour photos. Image 1 is protesters at Sydney Town Hall, National Sorry Day. A person is holding a sign saying, "Sorry means you don't do it again." Image 2 is a photo from the Sorry Day rally in Sydney's Victoria Park. It is taken at night, and people are marching with a sign which reads, "Fight for the Future," and is in yellow, black and red. Frame 21. Text says, The United Nations International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Harmony Day, the 21st of March. The International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination is observed annually on the day the police in Sharpeville, South Africa, opened fire and killed 69 people at a peaceful demonstration against apartheid, passed laws, in 1960. Racism, xenophobia and related discrimination and intolerance exist in all societies, everywhere. Racism harms not just the lives of those who endure it, but also society as a whole. We all lose in a society characterized by discrimination, division, distrust, intolerance, and hate. The fight against racism is everyone's fight. We all have a part to play in building a world beyond racism. Harmony Day was first held in 1999. According to the Department of Home Affairs, it is a time to celebrate Australian multiculturalism and the successful integration of migrants into our community. Australia is one of the most successful multicultural countries in the world, and we should celebrate this and work to maintain it. Harmony Week is about inclusiveness, respect and belonging for all Australians, regardless of cultural or linguistic background, united by a set of core Australian values. In 1999, John Howard fought to move away from multiculturalism, fought to dismantle native title, to destroy treaty aspirations, to ensure the Racial Discrimination Act never grew teeth, and to sweep the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination under the rug, entirely with the knowledge of the atrocity that the day symbolized. Color image. A palm print graphic with a heart in the middle and different colored fingers. Text says, International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, March 21st. Frame 22. Text says, Walk for Reconciliation 2000. The Bridge Walk for Reconciliation and similar events that took place around Australia in the weeks following were collectively the most significant demonstration of public support for a cause that has ever taken place in Australia. The march was a public expression of support for meaningful reconciliation between Australia's Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. Sir William Dean, Governor-General, 2000. All of us who are convinced of the rightness and urgency of the cause of Aboriginal reconciliation will be most effective and most persuasive if we have the strength and the wisdom to speak more quietly, more tolerantly and more constructively to our fellow Australians who are yet to be convinced. 2000 The Roadmap for Reconciliation. The Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation delivers its Australian Declaration towards Reconciliation and the Roadmap for Reconciliation. The report reinforces Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander aspirations for a treaty and a constitutional change. There is one colour photo of a large group of people walking across Sydney Harbour Bridge during the Walk for Reconciliation, 2000. They are carrying Australian and Aboriginal flags. Frame 23. Text says, Closing the Gap Dashboard. There are boxes with text information in them. Priority reforms. Outcomes related to reforming the way that government works to accelerate improvements in the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, Clause 25. Development of measurement of targets and indicators under the priority reforms is occurring across phases. See the Appendix, Attachment 5, of the Closing the Gap Annual Data Compilation Report, July 2024. Socio-economic outcome areas. Outcomes important to the rights, well-being and quality of life of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Outcome indicators. Life expectancy, 2020 to 22, 71.9 years for males, 75.6 years for females. Born healthy and strong. 89.2% of babies were born with a healthy birth weight in 2022. Early childhood education. 101.8% of children were enrolled in preschool in 2023. Children thriving. 34.3% of children commencing school were developmentally on track in 2021. Student learning potential. 68.1% of people aged 20 to 24 had attained Year 12 or equivalent in 2021. Further education pathways. 47.0% of people aged 25 to 34 had completed a tertiary qualification in 2021. Youth engagement. 58.0% of people aged 15 to 24 were fully engaged in employment, education or training in 2021. Economic participation. 55.7% of people aged 25 to 64 were employed in 2021. Housing. 81.4% of people were living in appropriately sized housing in 2021. Criminal justice, 2,304.4 per 100,000 adults in prison in 2024. Youth justice, 26.1 per 10,000 young people were in detention in 2023-24. Child protection, 50.3 per 1,000 children were in out-of-home care in 2024. Family safety, 8.4% of females experienced physical or threatened physical harm in 2018-19. Social and emotional well-being, 30.8 per 100,000 people took their own life in 2023. Land and waters, 4,314,744 square kilometers of land, 113,517 square kilometers of sea country. Culture and languages, 123 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages were spoken in 2018-19. Access to information, 88.3% of people personally used the Internet in the last 3 months in 2022-23. Frame 24. Text says the National Apology 2008. In 1995, a national inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families was established by then Attorney General, Michael Lavarch. The inquiry, conducted by the Human Rights and Equal Opportunities Commission, received nearly 800 submissions, including evidence from 535 Indigenous individuals and organisations. On 26 May 1997, the inquiry's Bringing 'em Home report was tabled in Parliament. The report documented the grief and loss caused by the breaking of cultural, spiritual, and family ties, and the intergenerational impact on the lives and well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, as well as their resilience and dignity. A key recommendation of the report was the need for an official acknowledgement of an apology for the forcible removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. On 13 February 2008, Prime Minister Kevin Rudd offered a formal apology on behalf of the nation to Australia's Indigenous peoples, particularly the stolen generations. There is on photo of the written apology to Australia's Indigenous peoples with the Australian coat of arms and the Honourable Kevin Rudd AC signature. Frame 25. Text says, The Uluru Statement from the Heart 2017. The Uluru Statement from the Heart is an invitation from a group of First Nations people to non-Indigenous Australians. Shared in 2017, the statement calls for substantive reform to help realise Indigenous rights through the establishment of an Indigenous voice to Parliament and a Makarrata Commission. Makarrata is a multi-layered Yolngu word understood as the coming together after a struggle. The statement specifies that the Makarrata Commission would undertake processes of agreement-making, treaty, and truth-telling. The Uluru Statement from the Heart, we, gathered at the 2017 National Constitutional Convention, coming from all points of the southern sky, make this statement from the heart. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent and its adjacent islands, and possessed it under our own laws and customs. This our ancestors did, according to the reckoning of our culture, from the creation, according to the common law from time immemorial, and according to science more than 60,000 years ago. This sovereignty is a spiritual notion. The ancestral tie between the land, or Mother Nature, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who were born therefrom, remain attached thereto, and must one day return thither to be united with our ancestors. This link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of sovereignty. It has never been ceded or extinguished, and coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown. How could it be otherwise? That peoples possessed a land for 60 millennia and this sacred link disappears from world history in merely the last 200 years? With substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. Proportionally, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not an innately criminal people. Our children are aliened from their families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them. And our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of our problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is the culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making between governments and First Nations and truth-telling about our history. In 1967 we were counted. In 2017 we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. Frame 26. Text says, The Voice to Parliament 2023 Referendum. On 14 October 2023, Australians voted in the Voice to Parliament referendum. The question, a proposed law, to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? The proposed law, being the Constitution Alteration, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice, 2023, would change the Constitution by inserting the following text after Chapter 8, Chapter 9 Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Peoples 129 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the First Peoples of Australia. There shall be a body, to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice may make representations to the Parliament and the Executive Government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice, including its composition, functions, powers and procedures. The proposed law would also change the Constitution by inserting the following text into the table of contents in the Constitution, after the reference to Chapter 8 Alteration of the Constitution, Chapter 9 Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Peoples. Chapter 9 Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Peoples. There is a graphic showing the result of the referendum. It shows 39.94% voted yes and 60.06% noted no. After more than 200 years of colonisation, many First Nations Australians feel more disillusioned than ever and rejected in their own lands. The impact of this rejection has been absolutely extreme on our people, our hearts, our minds and our souls. The Voice was an opportunity to unite the country and put us on a collective path to recognising the world's oldest civilization, something all Australians should be proud of. Instead, it was marked by misinformation, disinformation and racism. Katie Kiss. Frame 27. Text says, Are You Waiting for Us to Die? Report 2025. A new Healing Foundation report has found that only 6% of the Bringing 'Em Home report recommendations, made to support stolen generation survivors and their families almost 28 years ago, have been clearly implemented. It recommends a national healing package of priority changes to enable remaining elderly survivors to live out their days with dignity. The title of the new report reflects the collective testimony of stolen generation survivors, who are seeing their brothers and sisters passing away, and the urgency of the changes that are sought. Only 5 of the total 83 recommendations have been clearly implemented, 11 are a qualified pass, 10 a partial failure, and 45 have not been implemented. The status of 10 is unclear, and 1 is no longer applicable. There is a purple graphic which says, 54% of Bringing the Home recommendations have failed to be implemented. 12% further receive a partial fail. There is a second graphic with a quote attributed to Shannon Dodson, Yaru, CEO of the Healing Foundation. The quote, set against a purple background, reads, "It is up to all of us to understand the urgency and the need to ensure that those recommendations are implemented fully, not in 5 years, not in 10 or 20 or another generation, but now." Frame 28. Text says, Songs for Reconciliation. Australia has a rich history of music being used as a powerful tool for social change, with many artists writing songs about reconciliation and Aboriginal rights. These songs help raise awareness and inspire action toward a more inclusive and equal society. From Archie Roach's "Took the Children Away," which sheds light on the stolen generations, to Kev Carmody and Paul Kelly's "From Little Things Big Things Grow," which tells the story of Vincent Lingiari and the fight for land rights, music has played a crucial role in the reconciliation movement. Many artists, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, have contributed to this movement through their music. Yothu Yindi's "Treaty" called for the recognition of Aboriginal sovereignty, while Briggs' "The Children Came Back" celebrated the strength and resilience of First Nations people. Bands like Warumpi Band, Blackfella, Whitefella and Midnight Oil, Beds Are Burning, have also used their platforms to address racial inequality and land rights. These songs, along with many others, continue to encourage conversations about Australia's history and future, highlighting the importance of truth, justice, and reconciliation. This year, Goanna's Solid Rock is the song featured in the 2025 National Reconciliation Week choirs across the country, further contributing to this powerful movement. There is a screenshot of the Spotify playlist cover with different album covers. Frame 29. Text says, "The Life Without Barriers Rap Journey 2009 to 2025. 2009 National Cultural Respect Steering Committee. 2010 Cultural Respect and Cultural Safety Workshop. 2011 Broome, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples bailed from courts, remain on country." From 2012 to 2015, Life Without Barriers progressed into an Innovate Rap. Highlights include, 2012, Racism Stops With Me campaign. 2013 recognition by Reconciliation Australia, Parliament House, Leader of Reconciliation in Community Sector. 2014 collaboration with Earthboy, Josh Pike, young people co-write and produce the song, Someone Else's House. 2015. Enrollments at Minjalang and Lajamanu creches increased to 130 children. From 2016 to 2019 Life Without Barriers progressed into a stretch rap. Highlights include, 2016, Reconciliation Australia invited Life Without Barriers to participate as a corporate partner with Walja Jutunku Palyupai Aboriginal Corporation. 2017 partnership Lake Macquarie Toronto Library, Improving Aboriginal Literacy Program. 2018 The Life Without Barriers Story, documentary featuring Life Without Barriers reconciliation journey. 2019 Position Statement of Support for the Uluru Statement from the Heart. 2020 partnership with Traditional Owners, Noongar Whadjuk, Leaderville Meeting Rooms after Noongar 6 seasons. 2021 SNAICC National Voice for Our Children, Historic Partnership. There are 4 color photos at different rap pages and covers. Frame 30. Text says, "The Life Without Barriers Rap Journey continued 2022 to 2025. In 2022, Life Without Barriers launched our first Elevate Rap. An Elevate RAP is the highest commitment within Reconciliation Australia's rap framework. It signifies that an organisation has a strong track record of implementing effective rap initiatives and is ready to take on a leadership role in advancing national reconciliation. Achievements of our Elevate Rap so far: Transition Roadmap, Cultural Governance Group, Cultural Governance Framework, Two-Way Cultural Governance, Monthly Yarn-Ups, 8 Rap Working Groups, Allyship Programs, Collaboration with the Accountable Futures Collective, Collaboration with Joining the Dots Project, Joint NRL, Life Without Barriers Senior Leadership Webinar, DMH Dreaming Session, Reunification, Restoration, Cultural Immersion for the Life Without Barriers Board, Elevate Rap Video with Galimba, Newcastle Awabigal NAIDOC March, 209 deliverables with 95% on track. Partnership with SNAICC. Increasing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander workforce. Reconciliation Storyline Quarterly Update. There is a photo of the Transition Roadmap Plan with text and graphics and one photo of a group of Life Without Barriers staff at the NADIOC flag raising and march in Newcastle.